Good morning, everybody. My name is Tania Velasquez, and this is my research called The Cartoon as a Didactic Strategy to Develop Reading Comprehension in the Teaching of English as a Foreign Language in the Cycle 4 of Education School for Students. We have the introduction that this research aims to show the research progress in the relation to the development of reading comprehension through the implementation of comics as a didactic strategy to improve reading comprehension in the teaching of English as a foreign language for students of Cycle 4 of the Institución Educativa Compartir. We have the statement of the problem. The strategies used by teachers in their practice are not adequate. The curriculum is not suitable for students' education. Why? Because the strategy are only taught by children, that is, pedagogical activities that teachers think that the strategy are meaningful for adults' education, but it doesn't happen because the ages and interests of adults are so different in the case of children. Yes? And the activities are so traditional aboard for adults are not meaningful for the learning of process in the case of to get a new language, because the majority of these students have different type of levels. They are so beginners and they don't have enough vocabulary to get and to understand different type of text or different type of skills in English. In the case of the reading, text is implemented more than the cartoon because the teachers consider that the cartoon or different type of comics are not meaningful for students because it's only to entertain students and no is used in the case of education area. In the case of research question is, in what way can reading comprehension be developed through the use of comic in the teaching of English as a foreign language in students of Cycle 4 night shift in Institución Educativa Compartir? What strategies are used to develop reading comprehension in the teaching of English as a foreign language in students of Cycle 4 night shift of Institución Educativa Compartir? In the case of general objectives, we have to develop reading comprehension in students of Cycle 4 from the use of comics as a didactic strategy to for teaching English as a foreign language. We have specific objectives that are: 1. Improve the process of reading comprehension in students from the use of comics as a didactic strategy in the teaching of English as a foreign language. We have 2. Design 6 worksheets which implement the use of comics as a didactic strategy to strengthen the reading comprehension process in adult students. And 3. Apply the implemented worksheets and analyze the results in taking into account the stated categories in relation to reading comprehension. In the case of theoretical framework, in the teaching, we have 4 categories. Teaching as a foreign language, we have these 3 authors that mention that teaching foreign language focuses on understanding how a person develops different type of skills and abilities and competences to learn a new language, in this case, English. We have didactic strategy according to Oxford, Llamosa, and Ellis. We have that are actions and tools that teachers use in classroom in the learning process of English, of learning communicative competences of any language. We have reading comprehension. We have Camargo, Uribe, and Caro, Mormouth, Manning, and Pearson, and Unigarro that talk about this concept as it is basic decoding process in which the reading is involved to obtain new information through text or different type of mental things. In the case of andragogy, according to these 3 authors, talk about that the andragogy is the science that study the learning process of adults. In the case of literature review, we have some categories according to Valderrama, Larskin, Merma, that talk about motivation, that comics, cartoons, and graphic narrative, thanks to the elements that its elements have, help to students to understand more carefully, and it's a things that help students to increase the motivation, the creativity, and it facilitate to get new information because students associate the images and other elements that the comics, their narrative graphic have in the educational part. We have in this case we have investigación de metodología investigación. We have the context and participants, institución educativa Compartir located in Suacha, Cundinamarca, and we have psycho, fourth graders, and English teacher night shift. It's important to mention that the participants and the context of these participants or in this research carried out in Institución Educativa Compartir is the night shift is organized by cycles where they have all these cycles the students have English 2 hours per week, and the English process is not meaningful for that reason because the time is not enough. In this cycle, in this case of cycle 4, we have that they are validating 8th and 9th grade of secondary school, and we have that younger students that are approximately they are 17 years old and until 23 years old, and they are more receptive and skillful at the moment that teachers are explaining different type of topics or instruction or activities in classroom because they have more mental skills about English. But while the older students that they are in 33 years old until 60 years old, they understand different type of knowledge in a slow way to understand instructions, and for them it's so difficult to get new knowledge, vocabulary, to understand different texts because they didn't finish the primary schools, and to return again in the world of English for them is so difficult to get a new language, and they are so beginners. In the case of investigative paradigm, we have the qualitative. In this case, requires a depth of the understanding of human behavior and reasons to govern it, and in order to explore different type of social relations and describe reality of this research. In the case of action research, we have that the action research is proposed to identify teaching as a research process because it is a continuous search where the teacher or the research is understanding the teaching role in the classroom and integrating the reflection and intellectual work, and in the same time analyze the experience of this population. We have the instruments that are interview, questionnaires, focus group, worksheet, and file diary. We have the research paradigm that is the hermeneutical research or paradigm, and we have this paradigm explain the nature, the sense, and veracity of this phenomena to understand the complexity of life experience. In the case of research method, is the qualitative. The ethical considerations are that I'm going to protect the identity of these students because I'm going not to reveal names, pictures, or photos taken of this project. Also, the consent form is include information that the study benefits, and this project was approved by the head teacher, the coordinator, and in this the English teacher of Cycle 4. We have the research process through the instruments, and and that analysis, I'm going to get the conclusion of this project. We have the pedagogical interview. The principal topic of this pedagogical tool is the cartoon in the reading comprehension, as I told you, to develop the reading comprehension. I'm going to implement 6 worksheets that take into account the scaffolding according to Appleby in Langer. That is a way to describe essential aspects on formal structures. The teacher is supporting, encouraging, and providing additional prompts. I try to implement different type of approach to help them to understand reading comprehension through the comic. In the case also, I implemented bottom-up approach according to Council. English Council said that it happens when someone tries to understand language by looking at individual meaningful or grammatical characteristics with sounds, words to understand a whole text. Because in this case, the cartooning comics have elements that help students to understand. In this case, images, sounds, and bottom-up approach is so good approach to understand and help in this pedagogical interview. We have Llamosa and Gastulo and Murrieta that have pedagogical intervention that I was inspired. In the case of data analysis, this is important to mention that this is a preliminary data collection. In the case of data collection, thanks to the instruments I'm going to get through the interview, surveys, the file diary, I'm going to do a data reduction through bar charts, self-assessment made by students, the file diary that I did in that pedagogical interview. I'm going to reduce that information. In the case of reading and memoing stage, I have the file diary that accumulate reading ideas about the concepts and their relationship with this research. I have data display that, thanks to try to explain the data collection that I got, I'm going to explain through bar charts, self-assessment, and other elements that I got to get the data verification of this research. I have the data analysis and interpretation. I have some categories to explain you the categories of the data analysis. This is a priori categories. In the case of interview with an expert and in andragogy, we have Miguel Antonio Galvis. In the interview, I'm going to know characteristics in adult education, difficulties in adult education, in educational projects focused in adults. In the case of focus group, I'm going to know the difficulties in the reading comprehension, intervention of comics, the level of English, because I told you the students have different type of level of English, and I want to know that. In the case of interview with the English teacher, the current English teacher of Cycle 4, and if it's possible, an interview an English teacher that in other ages. Learning process of students, I want to know about the level of English that she perceives in her students, didactic strategy in English classes, and interest of students of different type of activities. Thank you so much for seeing this video, and I hope that you enjoy this video. Thank you so much.